So, spiritual alchemy. Spiritual alchemy. How many people remember the book The Alchemist? It was a while ago. I wasn't really thinking about that book at all, actually, until this morning, which was kind of strange, but I've just been thinking about transformation. You know, I do a lot of work in my coaching world. I work with women who are kind of in that midlife time when things are transforming. There's sort of that identity shift going on. And I was thinking about, you know, what's a word that exemplifies that? And I thought, being an alchemist kind of does. And then the more I thought about it, I realized that unity is all about spiritual alchemy. So just kind of rolling back a little history of alchemy and kind of tapping into what we're talking about here. In the 5th and 6th century, there were various streams of alchemists. And one of the main ones that was basically a combination of Roman and Greek was a man who wrote a text called the Emerald Tablet. And this is one of the key lines that was in the Emerald Tablet that I think you'll find very familiar. As above, so below, as within, so without. Does that sound like Unity 101? As above, so below. As within, so without. This is what they were talking about. Greek and Roman alchemists were talking about. There also were mystical Islamic alchemists. And Rumi, we could see Rumi as one of those, although we know him as a poet. He said, "Try to be gold. The alchemist is looking for you." The whole idea of alchemy is turning what is lead into gold. Turning what is lead into gold. Think about the metaphor of that in our own life. Do we have some lead in our life that we would like to turn into gold? It's very powerful to think about. You know, Meister Eckhart, we can think about the work of Meister Eckhart, whom I've talked about him in the past. And he was one of the Christian, basically mystics, who actually embodied the same understanding that we know as part of our unity teachings, as within, so without. And the idea was that the alchemist would really embody what they call the philosopher's stone. And it wasn't like a physical stone at all. It was basically a level of consciousness that they would go into that allowed them to transmute the physical from lead into gold. And so when we talk about what is the philosopher's stone in our spiritual alchemy, what's the philosopher's stone? It's our awareness of the Christ consciousness, of the higher consciousness of who we are. This is the key. This is the philosopher's stone. There is a beautiful quote that is actually in the Bible, and it's about the stone that was thrown away by the builders becomes the cornerstone. And so often, isn't that true? Like the things that we think that we need to discard are actually where the biggest lesson we learn about who we are is revealed to us, and that becomes the cornerstone. It becomes like the key to who we are in the world. And it's kind of interesting. I was looking again at the book by Paulo, I think his name is pronounced Coelho, close enough, something like that, at any rate. And this story of the alchemist, and without going into all the detail of the story, just giving you a little bit of an overview, it'll help us understand more deeply what we're talking about here in terms of spiritual alchemy. The story is about a young shepherd whose name was Santiago, and he lived in Spain. And he kept having a dream that there was hidden treasure in Egypt that he needed to find. And so he sold his sheep to get money to be able to make this journey across the desert to go to Egypt. And along the way, he had all sorts of trials and tribulations. He met a group in a caravan, and in that caravan was an alchemist. And the alchemist kind of became Santiago's mentor throughout this spiritual journey. The alchemist in the caravan taught Santiago, this young shepherd, the tools of alchemy. And one of the things he talked about was how there is a soul of the world. And it's through the soul of the world that we tap into divine guidance, we tap into omens. In the book, he talks about omens, but we can think about it as those divine moments where we have inspiration, something taps in and we see something and we realize that's an inspiration for us. This idea of the soul of the world is a deeper understanding of our own connection to all life. And literally in the alchemist story, the soul of the world includes not only those things that are animate and living, but things that are not alive, that are part of the global consciousness that we live in. And the story goes on that as Santiago is learning more about what it means to become an alchemist, he's learning more lessons in terms of his own awareness of who he is and what his divine purpose is in the world. This is kind of what the whole story is about, his understanding about, who am I in the world? He thinks he's going to get this treasure in Egypt. And how many of us are like that in our life? We have some goal, we think that that's going to be it. But he discovers along the way these mystical, in a sense, almost mystical powers that he learns from the alchemist. And one of them is, apparently, as they're traveling in the caravan, a group of thieves come. And the alchemist tells Santiago, you can become the wind and frighten the thieves. And he has enough of a connection to the soul of the world, to his inner awareness of the power within him, that he literally becomes the wind and scares the thieves away. And this kind of really enhances his awareness of the possibilities of his inner power and his inner connection to all life. And I think this is part of what we're being called into when we begin to claim our own capacity as literally spiritual alchemists. One of the things that I really enjoyed as I was kind of going deeper into this idea was the idea that the alchemist takes the lead and puts it into a fire, and it's out of that fire that it turns into gold. Thinking about the journey of Santiago, he had a journey of fire. How many of us have had a journey of fire in our lives? Yeah. If you didn't raise your hand, maybe you're already in Christ consciousness. I don't know. But most of us have had some sort of, feet to the fire experience in our life over time. And this is part of what we're being called into in our unity journey, is finding tools and ways that we're able to turn what might seem like lead into gold. So what are some of the things that are lead in our life? Things like fear, right? Fear. And we can transform that fear into a place of faith. I had a really interesting experience coming home yesterday, and I came home and I looked outside as I was driving to the house, and there were construction, like excavators, right on the sidewalk, parked right by our house. We live on a corner. And I knew they were doing some kind of construction. The sewers were being redone on the street alongside our house. Anyway, my daughter came over, and she came into the house, and she's like, Mom, I can't believe they put all that sewer stuff, all their pipes and they put it on your property. We have space between a fence and the sidewalk, and the people who were doing the construction decided that it was okay because we didn't have any flowers there, that they would just use the space in our property to put all their sewer stuff. My daughter was indignant. She was hot about this. And what I realized was her level of hot caught fire in me. And I got hot, and it was Saturday. I'm like, I'm going to call those people, and I'm going to talk to, and I'm, kind of storming around about the sewer stuff on the side of the house and how they have no right to do this. And then I realized it's Saturday. So guess what? I'm not calling them at all. And then the more I sat with it, I realized, I'm not I don't run that energy. But I realize how contagious it is when you're around that kind of elevated, whatever, anger, resentment, anything that is at that higher vibrational level. It can grab you, and you can get into that field. And so the reason I'm saying that is because we may not, in our own just quiet time, feel like we're running any fear, or we're running any anger, or we're running any resentment. But all we need to do is turn the knob, open our computer. There are certain places, if we go there, the temperature is very high, and it's very easy for us to get caught up energetically into that. And this is why, for me, the unity teachings are like the blessing of the planet that and it's not that we're the only ones teaching this. Clearly it was being taught in the 5th century, by the Christian mystics, by the Islamic poets, and even earlier than that, Greek and Roman times. They were teaching the same thing to us, that what is going on in here is coming outside. And we have reversed that whole understanding, and we've taken what's going on outside as being, and owned it as our own inner experience. And so it's so powerful for us to begin to become more aware of some of the powerful teachings that unity is offering us, that actually are rooted in very basic teachings in the Bible from Jesus. And what I want to say is that the biggest teaching I think that we have from Jesus is the teaching of forgiveness. Forgiveness can literally be the alchemist, almost like the alchemist, not exactly the Philosopher's Stone, but the way that the alchemist can use the Philosopher's Stone. And when you think about stories in the Bible of forgiveness, the first one that comes up to me is the prodigal son. And I feel like I could preach about the prodigal son pretty much every Sunday because there's so much in that story. But who was the great forgiver in the prodigal son? Was the father, right? Because the son was, he's, spending all the money, leaving town, rioting and drinking, and ends up eating with the pigs. And he comes back and feels like he's going to have to be, he's humble pie at that point. He's like, I'm going to have to be one of my dad's servants. And the father's like, oh, my son, I'm so grateful that you're coming home. Here, have my robe, have my ring. We're going to feast. You were lost, now you're found. This is such a story of forgiveness, isn't it? And Jesus talks about forgiveness to his disciples. He's been teaching a lot of people on the hillside in Galilee. And basically he's telling people, not just his disciples, but a group of people that are there with him. He's saying, well, you might find people who are cheating, you might find people who are lying, you might find adulterers. These are all the people he connected with, right? Remember that about him. He was not discriminating whether you were a priest or of a high and mighty person. Well, I don't know what to call him now. But he was connecting with people of all different ways and means and morals as well. And he was telling everyone, the most important thing you need to do is you need to forgive these people. They don't really know. They don't know. And while he's telling everyone that they need to forgive, Peter, who's super practical, his disciple Peter, says, okay, so, how many times do we need to do this? Is 7? Is that going to be enough? What does Jesus say? 70 times 7. It sounds like it's like every day, all day long, right? That's kind of what he said. Well, Charles Fillmore had a practice of that. He said, every night before you go to bed, you need to sit and you need to forgive everyone for everything, so that when you go to bed, you're not carrying any resentment, you're not carrying any anger, you're not carrying anybody else to bed with you in your head. It's just you and the divine presence. Such a powerful, powerful thing. And I was looking because I really wanted to see a little bit more about this understanding of forgiveness, not just in our unity teachings. And clearly Fillmore was about forgiveness, not because it was the morally right thing to do. I mean, yes, it was that. And maybe a regular Christian church, they would talk about the morality of how important it is for us to forgive. His was about, it's like a mental clearing for us. Why would we want to carry this energy around? Forgiveness is like a purification, in a way, of consciousness that allows us to connect with higher consciousness, to connect with the soul of the world, so that we can be free to hear the things that are ours to hear and to know what it is ours to do in the world. So he had a little bit of a different way of understanding what it means to forgive. And Emily Cady, who was one of the main teachers in Unity, and for those who don't know who she was, Emily Cady was a homeopath who lived in the late 1800s. And she was very tuned into the teachings of New Thought, and she wrote what's basically kind of the seminal book called Lessons in Truth. And when she spoke about forgiveness, she had a very practical thing. She said, forgiveness is to give up whatever we're holding on for something else. So we're giving up that anger for a sense of peacefulness. We're giving up we're giving up our fear for a sense of our faith in the power and the presence of the divine. So it's a very interesting way to look at forgiveness, and even thinking about, why would I want to do this? Do I want to hang out in this field over here, or am I willing to give it up? Not that giving it up is always easy. Not that. I'm not saying that it is. But it becomes a practice, and that's why I think forgiveness is such an important part of this alchemical process that is the spiritual alchemy that we're called into. I was looking at other teachings, and Yogananda is one of the teachers that my partner Roy's been very actively following for many, many years. And I was curious what Yogananda had to say about forgiveness. And he had an interesting thing. It was kind of like a mantra. He said, when you find yourself running any of these energies, anger, resentment, fear, say to yourself, that is not me. That's not me. And in a sense, the divine presence of who each one of us is, and the essence of who we are, is not that. So that became kind of like a mantra as part of Yogananda's practice. That is not me. He also said, when a person does wrong, people make mistakes not because they are essentially evil, but because they do not discriminate. Why shouldn't you be able to forgive other people? I mean, we all do the same thing, right? We make errors in judgment, and we do things. So why shouldn't we be able to forgive? He says, go on doing good no matter how much you get slapped by others. In your heart, separate their souls from their misguided actions, and give them love sincerely. That doesn't mean you put yourself in a dangerous situation. Clearly, we're not talking about anything like that, And in the Buddhist tradition, forgiveness, and I'm not an expert in any way, I just kind of looked up some information, but in the Buddhist tradition, they don't talk so much about forgiveness, but they talk about more of a purification. And in a sense, Charles Fillmore's talking about that. It's like a refinement. It's a purification of releasing the dross so that the gold is there, releasing those things that no longer serve us. And we can do that through the power and the presence of awakening to this, the soul of the world, the divine presence of who we are, that we are embedded in that presence. And from the practice of forgiveness, we're able to get more and more clarity inside of ourselves about the journey that's just ours. And just like the alchemist, just like Santiago in the journey, he thought the journey was all about the treasure that he was going to find in Egypt. But in the end, he realized the treasure was the lessons that he learned on the journey, the people that he met. And it was, like Kate's going like this, it was the deep connection to the heart. And that was the connection to the divine presence that is a loving presence that connects us with all that is, with all life. Such a powerful, powerful awareness. Basically, Charles Filmer says, forgiveness is giving up the false for the true. And I want to say that forgiveness is literally spiritual alchemy in action. It's spiritual alchemy in action when we're willing to release those things that no longer serve us. Doesn't mean we're releasing the person. We're releasing that field of energy that no longer serves us. So let's take a moment now, and I'm going to invite you to turn out the lights and to not turn them back on until I wave at you, because people have eyes closed for a while, I notice. These lights are very bright. So putting everything aside, just take a moment to breathe into the moment. Carl Jung said the divine within us is the gold that's hidden in the lead of our personalities. We all carry this divine, golden energy within us. And true alchemy is not about the transformation of metals, but rather the transformation of the soul as we move more deeply into the heart of who we are and our connection to the presence and the power of the divine within and without, as spoken of as the soul of the world in the book The Alchemist. We connect in with the Christ presence within us, a presence that indwells all life. So in this moment, allow yourself to tune in. If there's anything in your life that's feeling heavy, for lead would be that very heavy metal. Become aware of what that might be in this moment. And breathing into the possibility of releasing and letting go. Open your heart to the presence and power of the divine within you. Allowing the deep philosopher's stone, that indwelling awareness of the Christ nature that you are, the divine nature, the living, powerful spirit of truth that is who you are and who you've always been. Feeling the golden nature of who you are. And holding that golden nature, allow whatever it is that's feeling heavy, if it's fear, allow it to be dropped into the fire of the alchemist, to turn into the golden energy of faith. If the lead in your life right now feels like anger, drop it into the fire of forgiveness. Let it go and find the golden place of inner peace. If there's confusion that feels heavy, if you're feeling lost in any way, put that into the fire of the alchemists and allow the golden energy, the divine order of clarity to emerge. And if there's any sense of resentment, continuing to feel again and again some situation that caused you to be disturbed, drop that lead right into the flames and allow the chemical power, the alchemical power and presence of forgiveness as you give that up for something higher. We give thanks for this awareness that transformation within each one of us is a transformation for all of us as we take the time to embrace our spiritual practices, be willing to let go and to let God and forgive, to be fully present to the presence and power of the One, the soul of the world that indwells and inspires each of us. With gratitude, we give thanks for the blessings that flow to us and through us. We say, thank you, God, and so it is, as we gently take another deep and conscious breath and bring our awareness back into the body. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes, come back to this room.